Famed actor Richard Burton may have been one of the most acclaimed thespians of his generation, but that didn't stop the legendary figure from living a life of shame. He kept diaries of his life in the form of various pocket books that he'd carry around with him. These were left to the actor's final wife, who released them after his death. Join Factsverse as we explore how Richard Burton's diaries revealed his shameful life. The main sources of the shame that plagued actor Richard Burton during his life stemmed from two sources. The first was his strange upbringing and unusual relationship with his family. This culminated in a supposed accident that resulted in the death of his elder brother. The second source was the actor's relationship with Elizabeth Taylor, which lasted for 13 years. Both of these things haunted Richard until his death in 1984, causing the actor to escape into alcohol and self-destruction during his final years. Richard was one of over a dozen children born to a poor miner. As a child, he expressed a keen intellect, and his education was given priority over his fellow siblings. This included Ifor, Richard's elder brother by nearly 20 years. Ifor acted as a father figure to Richard while their real father was busy at work, and many have speculated it was Ifor who was most responsible for allowing Richard to be adopted. Richard had a teacher named Philip Burton who always had expressed interest in adopting him. Believing this might open up greater pathways for his younger sibling later on, Ifor was said to have played a part in making sure this adoption occurred. Richard was subsequently raised by his teacher and took his teacher's surname as his own. Although being adopted by his teacher certainly granted Richard more opportunities in life than if he had stayed at home, he still retained mixed feelings about the events all the way up until the time of his death. It allowed him to have greater success in life, but it separated him from his origins in a way he never recuperated from. It's largely possible Richard held a grudge against Ifor for setting the adoption up. It's also possible that such a grudge could have played a part in the supposed accident that occurred in June of 1968. That year, Richard and Ifor were reunited after many years of being apart. They were brought back together to attend the funeral of Richard's adopted father, who had committed suicide. The night Richard and Ifor reunited, they were said to have drunk nearly 20 bottles of wine between the two of them. While the event was initially a merry one, it soon turned dark. Richard had become a famous Hollywood actor and was living with actress Elizabeth Taylor. Ifor always judged Richard for leaving behind his first wife and children to pursue fame in Hollywood. Likewise, Richard likely resented his elder brother for whatever role the father figure had played in pushing him on the path to do so. It's not known exactly what occurred between Richard and Ifor on the night of their drunken reunion, but it's known neither of the brothers was ever the same. The events that transpired altered their lives permanently, and not for the better. The official report stated that Ifor had tripped down some stairs. The elder brother was paralyzed and would die within the year. Richard subsequently turned to alcoholism harder than ever before, in the midst of his already tumultuous relationship with Elizabeth Taylor. Although both brothers were adamant that whatever had occurred on that night was an accident, many have speculated that what occurred was actually the result of a drunken brawl between the two brothers, or that Richard had perhaps pushed his own brother down those fateful stairs. Richard had always been known for his violent temper, and it would not be the first time that a drunken Richard had engaged in physical conflict. Whether Richard was truly responsible or not, he blamed himself for what happened and was never the same. With the suicide of his caregiver and the death of his elder brother, he felt little attachment to his home. He returned to his Hollywood life with Elizabeth Taylor, though this relationship didn't offer Richard much reprieve. Soon, his self-destruction spiraled out of control. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like, and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. And stick around to find out more about Richard Burton. In addition to his troubling upbringing and the death of his elder brother, the actor's relationship with Elizabeth Taylor was also a great source of his shame in later life. The two starred in 11 films together and were married twice. During that time period, they were involved in a whirlwind romance that took a great toll on both of them. The first time Richard and Elizabeth ever saw each other was at a Hollywood party in 1953. Richard saw Elizabeth from across the room and was immediately stricken by how beautiful the 21-year-old actress was. However, Elizabeth recalls writing Richard off as being crass and vulgar. Elizabeth held these views on Richard from afar for the ensuing decade, before finally being forced to confront the actor face-to-face on the set of Cleopatra. Though the pair didn't plan on it, they soon found that they hit it off. All these years later, Elizabeth no longer found Richard to be quite so crass. Their romance on the set of the film blossomed into something much greater, as the two became entangled in a relationship that lasted for the next 13 years. Elizabeth was married at the time she began seeing Richard. According to legend, Richard answered the phone while staying at Elizabeth's house, and her husband was on the other end. Her husband was Eddie Fisher, a popular singer. He later died as a result of a drug overdose. By the time Richard and Elizabeth had tied the knot, their relationship was a tabloid sensation. The couple took the attention they received with a grain of salt and often played into scandals just to get a laugh. The couple was often spotted in public having loud verbal disputes, though they would claim these were simply vocal exercises to satiate onlookers. If their fights started as a tabloid game, they soon matured into something more serious. The relationship between Richard and Elizabeth was never a stable one. Elizabeth tried to kill herself twice during the filming of Cleopatra, and both parties turned to alcohol excessively during their marriages. Their lives of excess transcended both their extravagant arguments and domestic disputes. They were essentially Hollywood royalty and had the bank accounts to back it up. If Richard and Elizabeth initially claimed their fights were just a show they were putting on for press, they soon became something else entirely. As the marriage grew worse, Richard began seeing other people. This made their many arguments much more serious. In 1974, they divorced for the first time. After their initial divorce in 1974, they remarried a year later, but their second marriage didn't last nearly as long as the first and was over almost as soon as it began. After their second divorce, they remained apart until their deaths several years later. Although Richard and Elizabeth could never make it work as a couple, they still considered each other's destinies intrinsically tied together. If Richard hadn't died less than a decade after their separation, they may have even been married for a third time. Richard's father had been an alcoholic, and alcohol had played a major role in many of the events that caused the actor shame during his life. After the death of his brother and his divorce from Elizabeth, he had little in life but the bottle. He remarried twice after his second and final divorce from Elizabeth. He married British model and actress Susie Miller in 1976, and they remained married until 1982. He then married author Sally Hay. Richard and Sally were married at the time of his death in 1984, and Sally is the one who Richard left his many diaries to. In 1981, the actor had been diagnosed with cirrhosis and kidney disease, two complications often related to chronic overconsumption of alcohol. His cause of death ended up being a cerebral hemorrhage, and he passed away at 58. Now it's time to hear from you. Comment down below to share what your favorite role from Richard's Hollywood career is. And be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to FactsVerse if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.